Welcome back. So in this second video, we are going to be starting off with many more photos than we did in the first. And here I have an album of an arrangement of succulents and some flowers, and then I have two potential backgrounds that I am thinking about using. So just as in the last video, I'm going to duplicate each of these images in the photo editor that is on the iPad. And then I'm just going to simply apply a vivid filter to each one, similar to how I did so in the last video. I'm also going to be applying a vivid warm filter to each of the background images. And once again, I'm going to begin with a 3000 by 3000 pixel square. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the wrench and add a photo. I'll be using the background on the left, and the reason I'm choosing that one is because there's a little bit of a structure in the background, and I just want to show you that sometimes photos aren't perfect, and that's fine. I'm going to be putting my portrait figure right in the middle there. So it's going to be covering up that area. The next step is I'm going to be clicking on adjustments and applying a hue variation to this image. Right now I am absolutely in love with this purpley blue orange combination, so that's what I'm going to be working with. Now I'm going to insert all of the photos of the flowers and the succulents that I want to use, and unfortunately I can't select more than one. I have to do each one at a time, so I'm going to fast forward here as I bring them all into Procreate. So here in my stack of layers, or layers of flowers and succulents, I'm right now prioritizing which ones I absolutely definitely will want to use. And those top two I'm seeing as my focal points. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select each of the pieces of the flowers and succulents with my selection tool in the upper left hand corner, and I'm going to make sure that my freehand tool is also selected down below. And I'm basically going to harvest pieces from each of these photos. And the key here, it's a very sensitive tool once you have that freehand tool selected. What I've noticed is it's best for my hand not to touch the screen. So I'm going to do my very best to keep my stylus, have that be the only thing that is making the selection. If my hand touches the screen, then the selection will actually move and I'll have to start over. So I'm moving very slowly and very deliberately, and I'm just selecting. You can see the little marching ants that are forming. I'm just trying my best to select just inside the edge, but because it's almost virtually impossible to do that all the way around, it's okay, it's fine. Later I'm going to show you my trick for any kind of gaps or little extra bits that I've collected that I may want to erase later. So for now, I'm just doing my very best to make the selection. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just sort of thinking ahead of time before I tackle the flowers exactly what I want to do. And this particular tool is awesome because you can stop and start. So I could take a little break right here and then start in again where I left off. Once I've made my selection, I'm going to drag 3 fingers slowly and deliberately, and I'm going to hit copy and paste. And you'll notice here that it automatically takes my selection and creates a new layer. So I'm going to take the photo that I just used, I'm going to drag it to the bottom of my stack, I'm going to turn it off, and now you can see that my selection is sitting on top of the flower that's underneath it. So for now, I'm going to turn off my selection, but I'm going to leave it at the top of the stack so you can't see it. I'm going to repeat this process for every single flower and succulent that I have on each layer. I am going to move slowly through the harvesting of this particular flower so that you can see the the process, and then I'm going to be speeding up the other photos. They'll take a long time. And one of the things I did want to mention is this takes a little bit of practice. And when I first started using the selection tool like this in Procreate, I found myself having to stop and start quite a bit and start over, and that can be a little frustrating, especially when it's taken you a long time to make a selection. So don't be discouraged, just be patient. Again, I really do think that not touching the screen is the best way to go, just keeping the stylus on the image. And once again, I will turn off turn off and drag the flower image, and I'm going to turn off that little selection that I just made, but I'm going to keep it at the top, and I'm just going to keep going through all of these photos until I've made all the selections that I want to. And the reason I drag the photo that I've just made the selection from to the bottom of the layer stack is so that I may decide during the process of creating my figure and my illustration that I want to, harvest another little piece. And so I just like to keep my images in the stack. You don't have to. If it feels confusing to you to have that many layers, you can just delete them for now, because really if you need that photo, you can go get it again in your photos, right? So that's another option. I'm slowing down briefly for this particular photo because I want to show you that I really like this particular succulent. I want to also harvest that little stem, even though it's a little raggedy. I don't have to include everything about it, right? So I'll just slow this little selection down so that you can see that you can be very intentional with what it is that you want to include or not. And the other thing to remember too is if you do include something that you want to delete later, that's not a problem. We can always select it again as we're creating our image. So here I'm avoiding that little chunk of, dead stem. And the other option, of course, later is you can just erase those little parts that you don't want. So it's up to you, but I just wanted you to see how I go about doing this particular image. And here I'm speeding up again through the rest of my flower selections. So I've made all of my flower selections, but all of those layers are still off, and so now we're down to the bottom to the background, meaning the background is the only thing that you can see because everything else above it is turned off. So the flowers that I decided not to use, I'm going to also put them all in a group along with the ones that I did use. And like I said before, I just like having them there. You don't have to. Next, I'm going to go to the selection tool, and this time I'm going to have the ellipse shape marked, and I'm dragging my stylus and making just a simple ellipse shape, and the color at this point really doesn't matter. We can always change that. I have just a light beige going on right now. And then I'm going to use the move tool and going to size it and move it so that I have it positioned where I want to. And I'm keeping in mind that I'm going to give her some shoulders, and I definitely need room for her large flower and succulent hair that I'm going to give her. So that's all I'm considering right now. And you can see here that that ellipse shape is right above the background layer and all of the succulents are on top. And now I have turned on the very first layer that's right above the ellipse, and that is that little succulent that I was talking about before and showing you. And now I'm moving it into position. And you can see here that I'm making small adjustments too with her face. And I kind of imagined that these little tendrils would be kind of hanging away from her face when I saw the succulent. So that's how my imagination works when I look at flowers. But anyway, This little process here can get a little bit overwhelming because we're dealing with a lot of items, at least I am with all the ones that I've selected, but I'm just gonna do my best to, move things, and I don't want to make things too small because once you decrease the size of your items, then increasing the size later will actually cause them to pixelate more. Here I'm going to remove the very top succulent from this little group of 3. So in this case, I'm going to use the selection tool to just go around that particular succulent. I don't need to be as careful because I don't have to harvest it from a background, right? It's all by itself. So I just need to detach it from the other 2. And this time when I drag 3 fingers, I'm going to choose cut and paste. And the reason I'm doing that is I may want to use just that single little succulent that's on its own layer now for a different part of her hair. So I'm going to turn it off for now and just keep going with the positioning of all of these different items. And you've probably noticed, obviously, that I am not turning all the flowers on at once because it's just easier for my brain to just do one at a time and just arrange them intuitively, as I go along. And this is a really big, or one of the things that I really believe, because I've been making art for a very long time and I've taught lots of classes, I think it's really important just to trust your own instinct as to the next step and just trust that it's all going to work out. So right now with these are the main focal point flowers, right? So that's bigger succulent on the left. I wanted that to be really prominent, as this flower, I want it to be really prominent as well. And here I'm deciding, I think I'm going to cover up, some of what's already there, and you'll see here how I deal with it. So I decided I am going to keep that flower there, so I'm going to turn it off for the moment, and I'm going to remove from the tendril that top succulent. And once again, I'm going to be on that layer, and I'm just going to go ahead and select that whole top part and cut and paste it, and then resize the zinnia flower. And now that I have those 2 main ones positioned, I'm just going to speed up through the rest of them. And here, what I want to point out too is, design-wise, I want her hair to be very asymmetrical. I want it to be imbalanced, and that's part of the quirkiness of her personality. And I want to draw attention here to, there's a flower that I did not use, and it's at the stack at the bottom. And so I've just decided here at the last minute that I think I am going to use that little pink flower. So I'm taking a moment to select it, from the stack, and I'm going to add it to the right side of her hair. Here I'm making just small adjustments to those little tendrils. I'm actually, removing one and moving it a little bit. And now the next step is to create the palette. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose colors from the selections that I've already made. And here you can see that I've created a new palette by adding it with the little plus symbol right there in the upper right hand corner of the color palette. And I'm just touching the colors that I want from the canvas onto my palette. Since I'm having a hard time deciding on the skin tone from the colors that I see, I'm just going to use that darker brown to find a color that's a little grayer but in that color family. Once I land on the skin tone, then I'm going to also give her a neck and some shoulders on the same layer as her face and in the same tone. As I'm looking at my figure, I realize that I don't love these 2 small succulents that are attached to the larger ones. So I'm just going to remove these as I did and showed you before. The next step is to begin giving her her features. And here I'm selecting a green. I'm thinking she needs glasses since I wear glasses. I'm not going to create a big color palette, because I'm just going to be doing a few things, and I'm just going to be selecting colors as I go. So for now, I'm going to give her glasses with the green, and I'm working directly with the Studio pen without sketching beforehand, because it's really a simple face. So I'm going to just move forward, and then I will let you know my process and my thinking as I go along, as I speed up. So a couple things I'm thinking about. I want her eyes to be in the middle, more or less, of that ellipse that I made, and a little dot of white, and that really brings them to life. For her blouse, I'm just selecting the orange from that flower up on her head. The next step is to collapse the flowers, so I'm really happy with their placement. And the next step, this is my little trick for just softening all the edges. I'm going to add a new layer, and on this new layer, I'm going to be using the sketching pencil, the 6B pencil. And you'll see here that I will start picking colors as I go and softening all the edges with the color that is nearest to the part that I'm covering up. So in this case, that little bit of black goes away when I just color in using a little bit of that yellow. And I'm going around, and this process can take a while, you know, especially the selection was a little bit ragged. But I enjoy it. I feel like it's artsy, and sometimes I even make up parts as I go. For example, that did not have a reddish edge, but I'm giving it a little bit of more color. And here I cut off some of the red, so I'm just going to be adding some of that in. And you can layer color upon color, you know, so that you can really create the line to look like the other parts of your selection. And as I soften these edges, I'm going to go ahead and speed up. Again, be patient, and you know, it's fine if to use this, you know, pencil with your image. It's fine to alter the photo in any way that you like, and I actually really love the organic feel of the 6B pencil. So that's the one, that's my preferred choice. Once I'm done with all of the edges, I'm going to go ahead and make some corrections. I noticed, for example, that I forgot to give her eyebrows earlier. And I'm also deciding that I want a brighter or more intense orange, and I'm giving her some details. And this is where, you know, the personality comes in. I was going to I wanted to give her a name, so I just decided to call her Zinnia. And I also gave her a little bit of shading under her neck. And the other thing I'm doing now is I'm adding just some illustrated flowers to kind of bring this whole thing together. And I'm using the 6B pencil tool. And that's so that I can continue with that organic feel. And same with you know, the little details that I'm adding. So, you know, make it your own and have fun with the process. Add in flowers, you know, to the background, or anything really that you want to. Perhaps your background allows for a little house or a bird or a butterfly. The key, I think, is to keep it simple so that I don't detract from Zinnia, right? She's the main focus. In the next video, we're going to create a layered background for our illustration, and I have 3 different projects that I'm going to show you.